Welcome to the Spark It podcasts, where we explore stories, insights, and experiences that spark a fire within. I'm your host, Kimaru, and I'm joined by Patrick CJ for this very interesting conversation. And today we are turning our attention to a country that's often in the headlines for conflict, but not nearly enough for the untold stories of its youth, South Sudan. And Patrick is actually from South Sudan. So, why are so many South Sudanese students forced to seek education in Kenya, Uganda, and even further away from home? Is it lack of schools? Is it poor quality of education or safety concerns? That's what we will be diving into. And Patrick is here to offer us better insights as somebody who is from South Sudan or who might have actually gone through the system. So, Patrick, welcome to the pod.
Thank you very much. Very good to be on the podcast again.
I know, it's been a while, but yes, it's good to have you back, honestly.
Thank you.
So, yeah. So, anyway, before we even get started and dive even deeper, could you give us like sort of a background of how the education system looks like right now in South Sudan so that we can have a bit more context to the subject? Yeah.
Yeah. Maybe even before I respond to that question, I think maybe something to just get out of the way is I went to school in South Sudan. I did my high school in South Sudan. So I've had a fair share of going through the school system, the education system in South Sudan, and being able to see what I feel were some of the gaps or maybe what could be improved. Yeah, but yeah, I mean, honestly, like right now, I feel that we do have an education crisis in South Sudan because I think right now, as we speak, there are over 2 million children that are out of school. That is a huge number of children that are out of school. And when you look at that, that is more than 70% of all school-aged children. Yeah. So that's a huge number. So a majority of school-aged children in South Sudan are actually not going to school. You see, they're staying at home. Yeah. And this is probably also one of the reasons why literacy rates in South Sudan are really low. Yeah, they are really low. They are actually below 50%. In fact, it said that it's 35% for adults. And we are looking at adults that are 15 years. In this case, this is statistics. Takes into account, for example, children who are 15 years over. So, yeah, and 35% only. So the rest of the country, you could say, do not know how to read and write. Um, they are not very literate in that regard, you see. And even when you look at the literacy rates, for example, uh, from a gender perspective, I think like it's even worse on females. It's much lower there. Yeah. Compared to, maybe the male counterparts. And I'm telling you, I feel this is a serious crisis that South Sudan need to actually really like tackle, because this is a huge percentage of young people, of children that are not attending school. You see, and so many that are not yet receiving school. And actually, uh, right now, it's said that 1 in 3 children who enroll, for example, in primary school education, they do not finish it.
That's very concerning.
It is. It's very, very concerning. And also, honestly, uh, not even not 1 in 3, 1 in 10. Yeah. So 90% of people who are actually enrolled in primary school don't complete it. They don't finish. They drop out. Yeah. So it's a very um, very serious and concerning situation that we have with regard to education in South Sudan, honestly. And honestly, when you look at, for example, early childhood development education or maybe ECD programs, they are almost non existent. Yeah, especially in the case of South Sudan. Yeah. And I am speaking of this from an experience when there was not yet, so much war as we've seen in the last, 7 or 8 years or 9 years since it broke out in 2013. You see. So this starts, it could be way worse now than it was then. You see. So it's a very concerning situation. And when you look at university or tertiary institutions in particular, South Sudan has very few universities. Okay, we have a population of, I think, about either 10 million or 12 million. That's a big population. But we only have 13 universities. Yeah, that's a quite small number. So imagine if we had a significant, portion of the population going to school, right? These universities wouldn't be enough. And out of the 13, only 7 are government, universities or public institutions, and the rest are private. You see, so it's a very serious situation. So even the 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 children that are maybe going to secondary school and getting done, they have to either look elsewhere because I don't think the 13 universities will be able to accommodate all of these kids. It's not possible. I know. So it's definitely a very very serious issue, and this is even made worse, honestly. When you look at the news and read or listen to maybe uh, the news or maybe read from what politicians say and so forth, there is a dire humanitarian crisis in South Sudan. And this crisis affects education, like directly. In fact, there was a report by the World Bank that was released, I think, in 2023 that says over 76% of the South Sudanese population is in need of humanitarian assistance. That's a huge chunk.
It is
Yeah.
more
And
than half the country.
I know.
Mhm.
And that directly does affect education. Yeah.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah. So it's the reason probably, why we have very low literacy rates in South Sudan. Very many children that are ideally school aged are not going to school and things like that. And even when you factor in things like natural disasters, it gets worse. Yeah, because things like flood, things like droughts, which are very common in some parts of South Sudan. When you look at places like, for example, Jonglei or and other states where they are, flood prone and the drought prone, a lot of the kids in those areas do not go to school. Yeah, most of them stay home. You see. So honestly, when you're looking at when you're looking at it from that perspective, you realize that an education calendar is disrupted a lot. It does not continue like you maybe know normally in Kenya or Uganda or elsewhere. Yeah, there's constant disruption of the educational life of a South Sudanese child. And it's not just once, it's not twice, so many, you see, that happens. So things like the droughts and the flood that are very rampant did not just disrupt that, education calendar, but also, they basically affect already a very fragile infrastructure. Yeah, because most of these schools, for example, we have a lot of schools in South Sudan that are under trees. Yeah, there's no building, no anything. Kids come and they study under the trees. And there are even cases where people write on the ground. Yeah, no books. You write actually on the ground. And speaking from a personal experience, that is something I personally went through. Yeah. When I did my elementary, the school I went to, we did not have a class. Yeah, there was no building or anything. So we had this huge tree that we were studying under. Yeah. And we used to sit on the floor. We sit on the floor, and then we usually we are told to come with the sticks. That's how we learned, numbers, counting, and so forth. So we'd use some of those sticks for counting, but also we use them for writing on the ground. Yeah, so learning how to write and stuff like that. And eventually, I think it was UNICEF. I think UNICEF, yeah. They brought for us blackboards, very small blackboards. They're like small like this. Yeah.
And you'll be hung on the tree.
No, they're very small. You can hold them in your hand. Yes. Yeah, they're very small. So you write on them and then you rub off. Yeah. So we used to, and then we were provided with those. So we didn't have books. They're not there. No, because once you've written and then you rub it off and it's gone. Yeah, it's gone. So, so yeah, and it's so unfortunate that in so many parts of South Sudan that is still the case. You see that so many South Sudanese children are learning under trees and did not have books. They lack the books. Did not have pens. Right, for girls did not have the menstrual uh, hygiene materials they need to be able to stay in school, and stuff like that. So I think when you look at all of these things together, you start to see why we have a crisis, an education crisis in South Sudan. And it's probably the reason why the literacy rates, yeah, it's just very low. They remain very, very low. And even the quality of education itself in South Sudan remains very low. Yeah, mostly due to some of these factors, but also due to lack of funding, lack of investment in education by the government. But also, many teachers are honestly not qualified. They are underqualified, underpaid, and in most cases, unpaid. Yeah, I know it's a lot. Yeah, it's a lot. It's a lot to really take in. And honestly, this even gets worse um, when you look at it from the perspective of the girl child. Yeah, it gets really worse because there's a study that says that actually 3 in 4 girls are out of school. Yeah, 3 in 4 are out of school. So only one goes to school. It's a huge number. So that means literally 75% of girls are not enrolled in school. You see, they are home. And in fact, it is the highest proportion of out of school girls anywhere in the world. It is. It really is. Is a very serious one. Yeah. And it gets worse. Gets worse than that. 1 in 3 girls in South Sudan become pregnant at 15. Yeah. By the age of 15, 1 in 3 becomes pregnant.
A moment of silence.
Yeah.
That's a true crisis for sure. And I think
Yes.
to point to what you said, especially in the context of the girls and also in the context of ECD, if you don't have like proper ECD programs and
Yeah.
that sort of like forms the very foundation
Yeah.
for any given child,
Yeah.
that means even as they go up, they have a very they don't have a good foundation for sure.
Yeah.
So it means the quality is definitely not gonna be there for them.
Absolutely.
It's already compromised.
It is.
Wow.
It is. Yeah.
And the issue to do with girls too.
Yeah.
Because they say that if you educate a woman, you've educated a whole community. Because women do so much for a community in the context of even the kids they end up raising, for sure. So if you don't educate them, then
Yeah.
it continues the cycle of literacy. Maybe even them, they would not see the importance of getting their kids to school.
Yeah. Totally. Yeah. Totally. Yeah. And honestly, it's a very 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 shaky ground. Yeah. I think that the foundation that, let's say, someone that is maybe here in Uganda in maybe primary five or primary four, the foundation that they have uh, is way stronger compared to someone who is in the same class in South Sudan. And probably they perform way better than someone who is also in South Sudan in the same class. Yeah, because your education is constantly being disrupted. Yeah.
That's wow.
Yeah.
If that's like a true picture of what is happening there,
Mhm.
then I mean it's if it's not like if the government does not course correct, or there's no course correction for that, it means in the next couple of years, maybe 10 years from now, things will only get worse
Yeah.
because people are growing up.
Yeah.
You go to an ECD, whatever you want to enroll to a school, there is no good foundation.
Yeah.
You don't have whatever. And even I think there's something you didn't mention, the high schools, the ratio of the primary schools versus the high schools.
Mhm.
It's like there's more primary schools and very, very,
Few
yes.
secondaries.
So it means also people are missing out
Yeah.
on the most basic levels of education, which includes a high school education.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
That's actually really sad.
It is. And honestly, for one would even say for many South Sudanese children, boys and girls alike, for many of them, school or education is not really an option. You know, could be because of the circumstances that they are forced to face, or could be because of poverty, could be because of the harmful gender norms that still exist in some of our communities and families, but also could be, just because of the conflict. Yeah. South Sudan has been in war and civil war after civil war. Yeah. So all of these basically they affect, education. Yeah. Which is why for me, I think maybe many South Sudanese might agree with me on this, maybe not. But I feel we have an education crisis in South Sudan, a crisis that threatens the very future of South Sudan if honestly the government does not do something about it. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
And now that kind of brings us to the fact that a lot of, even in Kenya, when you go to towns like Nakuru, Nairobi, or even like the other day when I was coming here,
Mhm.
I was seated next to this dad. And then he started telling me about, oh, I was in Nairobi. He's from
Yeah.
South Sudan.
Yeah.
He's like, I was in Nairobi to visit my children, to see them in school.
Yeah.
He's like, oh, one of them is in Daystar, one of them is in Strathmore.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I feel like a lot of young South Sudanese end up in countries like either Kenya, Uganda,
Yeah.
or even other places
Yeah.
to seek, especially in the context of even tertiary education or even high school level.
Mhm.
Yeah. So, what are, from the context you've given, the background and all that,
Mhm.
what could be these challenges that are driving people to seek, education in other countries?
I feel like all of these, whether now, first of all, I would like to add to what you've said uh, about, some of these, the children of the elite going to study in different, places other than, their country of their own, or maybe going to the most expensive schools and things like that. It is exactly the case for South Sudan, for South Sudanese elite. Yeah. The politicians, the business people, the rich, their kids, of course, go and study abroad because they can afford it. Now, maybe for business people and whatever, those ones, maybe, they made their money out of their businesses. They can use it however much they want to use it. But for public officials who we have entrusted them, we voted them to go into those offices and serve us and come and improve our lives, maybe improve education for us, sending their children to study abroad in different countries other than South Sudan. That removes the urgency to invest in public education in South Sudan. Why
My child is
invest?
not here. Yeah.
Exactly.
Mm.
You see, why invest in education in South Sudan when all your children are in Kenya's best
Oh,
schools?
by the way, those are like really good private schools, actually.
I know. Yeah. So some of us uh, who do not have the capacity to be able to go to some of these fancy schools in a different country, we are left to struggle with whatever is there that is thrown at us as education. Yeah.
By the way, could you speak more on the in that context for an average South Sudanese person who can't afford that? Could you like tell us how that kind of transition looks like? What kind of schools do they end up going? Or are they even able to even pursue their passions, or it's like the end of the road for them in the context of tertiary education?
Well, so South Sudanese education system is similar to that of Kenya. Yeah. As in, it is made in such a way that it is 8-4-4. As in, you spend 8 years of primary school from grade 1 to grade 8. And then you go to high school, you spend 4 years, and which is from Form 1 to Form 4. And then you go to university, 4 years. Yeah. It's similar, like the one of Kenya. Yeah. But it's a relatively new system. I think it was introduced in 2014 or 15. No, 14, I think. If not 14, maybe 13. Yeah. But that was when it was introduced. So it's pretty new. Yeah, it is. Yeah.
So for students now, I said the average student, how easy is it to transition to that, or are there like gaps? Do people end up falling behind because of now they can't afford maybe to go to a Kenyan university because maybe their parents cannot afford to take them to that, and maybe the education system in um, South Sudan, maybe the university there, lack of infrastructure, whatever. So how does that end up looking like?
Honestly speaking, for the ordinary South Sudanese child, uh, I would say the ordinary South Sudanese child goes through so many educational disruptions than probably any other kid that is studying in Uganda or Kenya or elsewhere. You're struggling with poverty, you're struggling with hunger, you're struggling with conflict, literal war all of a sudden, and you have to move from one place to another and stuff like that. So uh, kids go to school, and maybe because of maybe the war or unrest or basically instability, you are forced to move from maybe this place you were living in to a different state. And that definitely means that you're leaving your education world and so forth behind, and you have to assume a completely different one and stuff like that. Or in the process, maybe whoever is paying you to school, they lose their life or lose whatever they were using to sustain you or to pay for your tuition and other needs. So it's kind of it's kind of a very rampant thing that happens with so many South Sudanese. I'll share with you my personal story. So when I got done with high school, and this was in South Sudan, in Yei, where I come from. When I got done with it, basically, I needed to go to school, and my goal was to get a scholarship. And I worked so hard. I worked so hard to really get grades that would be able to, land me that scholarship. And I worked so hard and was among the top 10 best students in the country. In fact, the top best 5 students in the country. I was among them. And most often, the government automatically rewards these students with scholarships to study either in the country or abroad and things like that. Now, for our case, most of us didn't end up getting those scholarships, even though we have been called so many times. We didn't end up getting those scholarships. As a matter of fact, people who were not in that list got those scholarships. Yeah, but not us. And so for me, for example, in my case, since I didn't have someone who was going to pay for my tuition, I decided, focus on work instead and stuff like that. And you know what? To be able to raise those resources myself and so forth, I had to stay at home 7.5 years before I joined school,
Wow.
before I could join university.
That's a long time.
It's a long time to wait.
Yeah, and you could easily give up and just continue with life.
Exactly. And so my story is the story of so many South Sudanese children out there, you see. And some of them, cannot afford to wait that long. In the middle, maybe you get married or maybe you get dragged into so many other things. Yeah. And all of a sudden life has turned upside down. You can't even recognize yourself. Yeah. And that is the story of so many South Sudanese. So someone who's, very passionate in high school, primary school, they had big dreams. They wanted to achieve A, B, and C. And all of a sudden, all those dreams are out of the window. Yeah. Yeah. All the dreams gone.
We are quite privileged, I must say, in Kenya.
Yeah, you could say that. Yeah. Yeah. Honestly, unlike Kenya, unlike Uganda, uh, education in South Sudan hasn't just been neglected. It has been neglected, of course, but it has also been politicized, centralized, and it is deeply unequal. Yeah, so unequal. So the children, the children most in need of education are the ones most ignored. Yeah, are the ones most ignored.
And that brings me, we're talking about just South Sudan, but there's a lot of South Sudanese also kids in refugee camps because of course of the conflict and all that. If that's what exactly is happening in their country, then how is the education looking like for a kid in maybe Rhino refugee camp or any other camp around here, especially in Uganda, where some of them are based? How is that even looking like for them now?
Honestly, now, they are definitely, the education in the refugee camp is arguably, I could say, relatively good compared to maybe what is in so many places in South Sudan. It's definitely relatively good. Although you could maybe not say the same, for example, for a school in Kampala or maybe a private school in Uganda. The education quality is not the same. But I think uh, the education quality definitely in the refugee camp outcompetes most of what we have probably.
What makes the difference?
Whether it being, for example, equipments. Schools here are relatively equipped. Even those in the refugee camp, they are relatively equipped. Now, they are not the most equipped schools, but they have a considerable level of equipments that can allow you, for example, if you're doing sciences, to be able to do practicals and things like that, or are relatively equipped with books, very equipped library and things like that. Now, in South Sudan, most schools do not have these equipments. Most schools do not have a well-stocked library that is accessible. Yeah. And Uganda, I feel like is a luxury. There are public libraries, a lot of them. Yeah. Including here in Kawako. There's one. You can access, you can go borrow a book and stuff like that. Now, those are very rare. In some parts of South Sudan, they're there, but they're very rare. You see, and most often, probably some of the books you're looking for, you won't be able to find them. Yeah. So you are fighting against so many odds. So honestly, if someone, in my opinion, if someone is able to get a first grade in South Sudan, uh, out of all, whatever they face, if they come here, they will even do extremely wonderful. Yeah, where there's almost all the the tools you need to be able to succeed. Yeah, because there you're literally using what you have in your hand. Yeah, you do much of the work. Otherwise, you won't be able to pass.
So, could we make the assumption, or would it be right for me to make the assumption that the reason why in a refugee camp the education would be a little bit better than in South Sudan is because of private investment in the context of maybe non-governmental organization putting in the effort?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I could say that too, but I also could say that in South Sudan, we don't just lack uh, a deliberate, like massive investment in education by government. We also lack massive investment in peace and security that would be able to allow, for example, private investors to be able to come and, let's say, establish schools and stuff like that. Because otherwise, why would you put in a lot of money to invest in a place that otherwise you're going to just lose the money? Maybe due to, insecurity or instability or stuff like that.
Wow.
You see?
Actually, that plays a big role.
It
The
does.
insecurity is what sort of caps everything.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, as a result, of course, what happens is that the elite send their children abroad. And so they don't mind investing in public education. And for other ordinary South Sudanese who are displaced and now are forced to go and live in a refugee camp and they study in schools that, are not up to the best quality, but, that's what you've got. When you look at all of this stuff, you see that South Sudan is not just okay without sustained access to education. South Sudan is not just losing its students to Kenya, to Uganda, or other neighboring countries. South Sudan is losing an entire generation. Yeah, an entire generation of young people that would have become future leaders of South Sudan, future teachers of South Sudan, and peace builders. You see, South Sudan is losing all of that. And I will even tell you this. So, most schools in South Sudan, now, maybe most would not be proper, but many schools in South Sudan are located in conflict affected, zones and stuff like that. For example, if you look at, conflict affected zones like Unity State or Jonglei State, schools have been in so many cases used as shelters or military camps. Yeah, where soldiers stay. So this makes learning almost impossible. Yeah, it makes learning almost impossible. You see, and I'll I'll give you this story uh, about one of my brothers. He's a teacher in South Sudan, and he teaches in South Sudan. So he and a certain friend of his were taken to go and teach in a place called the Ural in South Sudan. And this place, the school they were teaching at, and this is a secondary school, according to what he said, is that they, as the teachers, were teaching at gunpoint. Yeah, the students come to class with guns.
What?
Yeah,
It's the students.
yeah,
Oh.
yeah. And you are teaching at gunpoint, and you are teaching without food. You're teaching hungry. Yeah, you're teaching hungry, literally. And he was saying some of the teachers are actually beaten, and because of hunger, you're teaching for long hours, and according to him, schools there operate the whole day, so you are forced to teach the whole day. You're not resting from since when you woke up, and you're doing that without food. And he was saying some of the teachers collapse or faint in class.
That's sad.
I know. He didn't last a month. He ran back, said, I give up.
Good for him, honestly, at that point. Yeah. It's either you die of the gun or the hunger.
Yeah,
Wow. That's actually sad,
I
honestly.
know.
It's very concerning.
It is. You see, it is very concerning.
Are these students carrying guns to class for their own protection or
Again, it's what's going on in South Sudan. The conflict and so much more has made, and also honestly, conscription also, of maybe people by maybe rebel groups or militia or stuff like that. I think this has made like things like guns very accessible, you see. But also, the communities that live there are mostly cattle keepers. And so most of them have guns. Yeah, most of them have guns and they use it to protect their animals. But also, some of those places, some of the um, places that are most violent. Like you hear sometimes lots of people are just being killed. Uh, and it's not because sometimes of war. Sometimes it's just because of these communities fighting each other, maybe over cows, cattle and stuff like that. Yeah. So students show up to class with guns and teachers are teaching. They teach at gunpoint. They go all day hungry and some of them faint in class. I know. It's devastating. Yeah. And yet a few people in Juba, politicians, are enriching themselves with our resources. Resources that are ideally supposed to be used to improve our lives, to improve the quality of education. You see?
and I think that's an issue that actually, apart from South Sudan, I think it's an issue that cuts across in African countries. Like the political class, they have had a way of doing things that has like devastating effects on the people, and then for them they're doing well. Even like I would say in Kenya, the other day I was reading about, sorry to digress, but I was reading about the social health thing authority in Kenya, the SHA, and you realize that these people who are in parliament, they don't even use that particular insurance. I think they actually have a totally very inclusive, you know, kind of insurance. So I guess at some point the reason why they become so detached with their reality, as you said, even in the case for education in South Sudan, is because it doesn't affect them. Whether the fuel prices hike, their vehicles are already fueled by your tax money. So when you're complaining about fuel, about prices of goods, they might not even feel that. If it's the whatever health system, they're not going to the same hospitals you're going to. They probably get sick and they'll be flown out of the country. They're in India, they're in London, they're wherever for treatment. But for you, you have to go to your local dispensary or local hospital where there is no maybe like a machine that needs to do a scan or something. And they are so detached from that reality, which goes back to that issue of the school. If you're taking your child to Nairobi, in a university that I also didn't attend myself as a Kenyan,
Yeah.
because it's expensive. And of course, I'm imagining if you are from another country, definitely your rates are not going to be the same, even for a student from Kenya, a Kenyan national. So it means, yeah, you wouldn't know what the issue is because your child is not coming back to you at home to complain that today the lecturer didn't do this or we didn't have books in the library. So it's a sad thing.